When the ball was snapped with 4 seconds left in the half, nobody in the stadium pretended it was anything but an act of wild, slightly reckless faith. Trevor Lawrence angled a pass, the clock stopped, and the Jaguars trotted out a kicker who, until 3 months ago, was a name more whispered than celebrated. Cam Little took the spot, the stadium inhaled, and then he did something that made history. He drilled a 68-yard field goal, the longest in NFL history. Reuters Act 1 set the scene, the awkward, beautiful math of modern kicking. NFL kickers live in a world where 60 yards is no longer the moon. 68 yards sounded absurd until it happened. Little didn't just barely clear the uprights. The ball flew with room to spare. A booming, confident arc that made you rewind the replay twice because it felt impossible and yet utterly real. That kick didn't land in a vacuum. It shattered a mark held by Justin Tucker, whose 66-yarder had been the gold standard since 2021. ESPN.com Act 2, The Human Thread. Cam Little is not a household name because he's from a dynasty of kicking royalty. He's a sixth-round pick who earned his place the hard way. He'd already shown the leg. A preseason 70-yarder gave the Jaguars confidence to even consider a 68-yard attempt in a live game, but preseason feats don't write your legacy. Little had been nearly perfect as a rookie and then staggered into his second year, carrying the weird public pressure that comes with expectation. The 68-yarder was both a reminder of talent and a response to doubt. Reuters Act 2 continued. The game's heartbeat. That 68-yard strike mattered not only because it broke a record, but because it changed the scoreboard, the locker room mood, and, in a quiet way, the entire trajectory of the night. The Jaguars eventually needed every ounce of that late half heroics. Little would come back later in regulation and drill a 48-yarder to tie the game, sending it to overtime, where Jacksonville edged the Raiders 30-29 in a wild finish. Those kicks were beacons, tiny, violent acts of geometry that rearranged the destiny of a 60-minute fight. Reuters Act 3. Why this matters beyond the stat sheet. Records are shiny, but the real story lives in the cracks. The gamble a coach takes, the faith a franchise places in a young player, the way a single swing of a leg can quiet a crowd and steady a team. In a league obsessed with quarterbacks, the moment Little produced showed a different currency: impact. A perfectly struck 68-yarder is a reminder that football is still a game of moments where a specialist can alter a season's narrative just as a quarterback can. The Jaguars didn't win because of a record. They won because those kicks turned a likely loss into a lifeline. ESPN.com. Pause for texture. Imagine the locker room afterward. Guys who were frayed by mistakes and blown coverages huddle up, but now there's a new rhythm. The guy who was a sixth-round afterthought is suddenly a vaulted part of the team's DNA. Coaches who once hesitated to attempt a Hail Mary in a preseason drill now make bolder calls because the belief has shifted. Fans who complained about missed opportunities are silenced, not by an argument, but by the thud of the ball hitting leather and sailing through a November sky. Act 3 deeper. The market and the meaning. Kicking is part science, part craft, part nerve. Weather, footer, snap, hold. A dozen variables line up and pray for perfection. When a young kicker nails a 68-yarder, it rewrites scouting reports and forces rival special teams coordinators to recalibrate how they play the shadow game of field position chess. It also nudges the league's collective gaze. Advocates will point to youth development and coaching. Skeptics will say the ball got lucky. Games settle debates. Kicks like this complicate them because while physics explains distance, grace and timing explain wonder. Reuters finale. The personal image. There's a short film in Little moments. Little bending to inspect the turf after the kick, teammates slapping helmets, a coach who once tabled a 70-yard attempt, now smiling with a little wise embarrassment. In overtime, after the 48-yarder forced the extra period, the defense closed it out. The scoreboard read 30-29, but the memory of a 68-yard, clean, loud, historic swing will outlive the stat line. That kick will be replayed, memed, and taught in film rooms by special teams coaches trying to analyze what went right. It becomes part of the Jags' lore and the league's history simultaneously. Reuters. Last thought. The small human truth behind the sound. Records fall, seasons shift, players get paid and critiqued and traded. But there's something simple and stubborn about the sight of a ball flying true toward a goalpost. It strips the game back to its purest terms, a contest between precision and chaos. On that night in Las Vegas, Cam Little offered the simplest of demonstrations. When preparation meets courage, the improbable becomes possible. The length of a field goal may be measured in yards, but the echoes it leaves are measured in moments, the kind that turn fifth rounders into folklore and late November nights into stories you tell for years. Reuters, 68 yards, 4 seconds on the clock, one snap, one kick, one new piece of NFL history. They stopped the clock, Trevor Lawrence spotted the spike, and the Jaguars dared a 68-yard field goal, not as a Hail Mary hail, but as a calculated, confidence-fueled swing. Cam Little stepped onto the turf, foot met ball, and the roar that followed was part celebration, part collective disbelief. The ball sailed true, clearing a mark no NFL kicker had ever officially cleared in a regular season game. It was a shot that rewrote the map of what's possible on a football field. ESPN.com, if you blinked, you might have missed the setup. This wasn't a rookie fluke or a fluke of wind miracle. Little had already shown the Jaguars and anyone paying attention that he owns a leg with elite range. He drilled a 70-yard field goal in preseason earlier this year, a kick that didn't count in the record books but very clearly counted in the coaching staff's confidence meter. That preseason 70-yard strike turned the "are you serious" play call into a reasonable gamble when the situation called for it. Reuters context matters. Justin Tucker's 66-yarder from 2021 had stood as the modern gold standard, a kick that felt untouchable until Sunday night. The NFL's kicking evolution accelerated in fits and starts over the decade. Stronger legs, better technique, different ball handling, and a moment where the margins between long and possible have narrowed. Little's 68-yard boot didn't just nudge that trend, it shoved the prototype forward and suggested that the long field goal deterrent we thought existed is now, at least sometimes, negotiable. ESPN.com, here's the film room translation of what made it work. First, precise execution. The snap and hold were textbook. The operation between center and special teams unit had to be flawless for a kick that long. Second, trajectory. For a kick to cover 68 yards without catching a gusty break, the kicker needs an optimal launch angle and pure contact. A little underpowered and it dies short. A little low and it's blocked. Little's strike had enough elevation to clear the rush, but enough carry to get there. Third, confidence. Coaches call plays they believe their personnel can convert. The preseason 70-yarder gave the staff empirical evidence that Little's range was real, not hypothetical. Reuters to Alvarez. That confidence rippled through the rest of the night. Little wasn't just a one-hit wonder. The kid shoved the Jaguars into overtime with a clutch 48-yard field goal in regulation, and then watched the drama unfold until Jacksonville walked away with a